Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel Plant Pause, where we talk about all things cats and plants. It is a very hot day today here in Oregon, about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So yes, nice and toasty. I just thought it'd be a perfect time to do some watering. I know that a lot of my plants right now are quite thirsty, and I thought it'd be a perfect time to bring you guys along with me. I just kind of wanted to put together a video about basically watering basics. I know that when I first started out with houseplants, I had so many questions regarding watering. Watering just seems so simple, right? Like you just take the plant and you water it when it's thirsty, done. But when I actually got to the point where I needed to water my plants in the beginning, I would hesitate because I was asking questions like, how do I know it needs to be watered? How much water do I give it? Do I need to give it any sort of fertilizer? Do I need to give it like distilled water? I didn't know any of these things, and I ended up just doing a lot of research. I just remember at the beginning I thought it would be really helpful to have just a super basic and simple video that just answered all my questions about watering. And so I wanted to do that for you guys today. And hopefully I answer all the questions you might have if you're just starting out. So this will be the beginning of a series of just basically basics. Not necessarily how-tos, because it honestly is different for everybody and your environment. So depending on how much sunlight you might get in your house, how humid your environment is, what the temperature is throughout the year, all of these play a part into when your plants need to be watered. So it's going to be different for everyone. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. It is not just set in stone for everybody, but I will try to cover as many questions as I can, at least from my experience, the questions that I had. And that will hopefully help answer for you too. So as you would have seen in my plant tour video that I would have posted probably the week prior to this video coming out now, and if you haven't, if you want to check it out and you're interested, I'll link it down in the description box below. But in my video I mentioned that a lot of my plants in my plant room here are in plastic nursery pots, and I got these off of Amazon. I love them personally because I can see the roots, and it might be hard to tell on camera here, but in this pot here, if it'll focus, you can see pretty well all of the soil, all of the roots, and I can usually tell how wet it is. So if you are a beginner, I might suggest these clear pots, just so you can really see the health of your plant. They're just really cool. I like them a lot. For me, most of the time now, I kind of just go off the weight of my plant because I know kind of how heavy they should be, and when they're super light, then I can tell that they're pretty dry and need watered. But I know that a classic way to tell whether your plant needs watered or not is by using your finger. That's just the classic easy way to do it. Some people prefer it more than others, and if you don't feel comfortable or you feel like you can't get a thorough tell by using your finger, that's totally fine too. But usually you can just stick your finger in the soil, and this one I can tell is still a little bit moist. It's not quite ready to be watered again. This plant in particular, I kind of like to let dry out between waterings. And as you get to know your plants more, obviously you'll know how often they require water if you do your research, which I hope you will when you get new plants. Highly recommend it. It helps so much. But like this one is in a smaller pot, and so it dries out a little bit quicker than that one. So I can tell that this one does need to be watered. It is definitely super dry in there. You guys can see. It's just, yeah, it's very dry. Another way to tell if it needs to be watered is to use a moisture meter. Let me grab it. This bad guy here. I'm sure you have seen it before. If not, I got this one on Amazon for I think about 10 bucks or so. I will link it down below if you guys don't already have one. They are a super big help, especially if you are new and you can't quite tell yet whether the soil is moist or not, or if you're not comfortable using your finger. One of these is perfect for you. So I highly recommend one of these. But it's super easy to use. All you have to do is grab your plant, stick the moisture meter in there, and then it will tell you where it's at. Okay, I went and found a plant that I know for sure is moist. I think a lot of my plants up here are gonna be mostly dry. So I'm gonna use the moisture meter on my Calathea warshawixii here. I knew that this one was still gonna be a little bit moist, and I wanted you guys to see what the reading looked like. So you're just gonna stick it in the soil here, and it will tell you what the reading is. And on here, it looks like she is just a little bit moist, but on the drier side. And as these like to stay mostly moist, I will probably need to water it here in the next day or so. But yeah, it's super helpful if you have a somewhat deep pot as well, and you can't get an accurate reading with your finger at the bottom of the pot. Definitely use a moisture meter. So those are 2 ways to be able to check whether your plant is thirsty or not, by 1, using your finger, or 2, using the moisture meter. And sometimes some plants will just straight up tell you whether it's thirsty or not. Sometimes it can be a little bit, not too late, but prefer not to let your plants get to this point. It depends. Some of them are more hardy than others, but I know, for example, my pothos is very telling when it's thirsty. It gets very droopy, and then once I water it the next day, it perks right back up. So let me see if I have an example of a really thirsty plant that you guys will be able to tell. Okay, I couldn't find any plants that are currently super obviously thirsty, so I found some footage from my plant tour that I just did. The pothos on the left, on the top of that shelf there in the terracotta pot, is super thirsty, and compared to the other plants next to it, it's very obviously thirsty. As you can see that the leaves are curled, so it is obviously telling me that it needs to be watered. What we're gonna do now is I'm gonna take you guys into my kitchen with me, and I'm gonna show you how I water different types of plants. I'm just gonna have a nice real close-up so you guys can see. I'm gonna use some different types of pots as well, so you guys can get a little bit of a mixture of what that's like terracotta, my plastic pots here, just the regular nursery pots that the plants usually come in, stuff like that, because they all look a little bit different. And I remember when I first started out, I didn't always know the little tips and tricks with watering and the different pots and all that kind of stuff. So let's go into my kitchen and I will show you guys how I water. Alright, we are at my kitchen sink, and I'm starting off with my little Peperomia scandens here in this tiny little pot. Just showing a thorough watering and letting it drip all the way down. Let all the water get out of it until it mostly stops dripping, and then I call it good. Next is my philodendron tenue. I've got a clear pot on this one, so it's really easy to see the soil like I said earlier. Up close you can see that it looks pretty dry. So just give this one a thorough watering as well. Let all the water drain through. Up close you can actually see the water draining down, which is really helpful. Really cool to see. In most pots you can't see that, so I really enjoy that about these pots. And then next is my Hoya Rebecca in this little small terracotta pot that obviously only has one hole on the bottom, so I like to tip it in each direction to make sure all the water can get down through that one hole and make sure it's all drained out. Next I have a Philodendron Brandianum in just the nursery pot that it came in, making sure to water it thoroughly and then let it drain through all of the holes, so rotate it each direction so all the water has a chance to escape. You don't want any excess water sitting at the bottom. Next I have some really tiny terracotta pots that have some Hoyas in them. This is a little trick that I didn't realize before, and I actually think I ended up overwatering a plant because I didn't know this, but they have a super tiny drainage hole in the bottom. So what I do is tip it upside down like that while holding the soil so it obviously all doesn't fall out. And then that helps get the excess water out of the pot. Otherwise it's just going to be sitting there and drain super slowly, and that can lead to root rot. And then I have another little Hoya here that I'm doing the same thing with. Just dump out the excess water and it's good to go. Here I am just checking my money tree, taking it out of its little pot, and then just doing a check with my finger. I wasn't completely convinced that it was all dry, so I got my moisture meter out and it is in fact dry. So I gave this a very thorough watering, and you can see all the water draining out, which is beautiful. It means you have a very good draining soil. And then, like I said, just rotate it every which way, each direction, to let all the water drain out of each hole. And then once it's mostly done dripping, I go ahead and put it right back where it was. Okay, the last thing I wanted to cover in this video that also has to do with watering is obviously fertilizer, plant food. I'm just gonna share with you guys what I use personally. Obviously it is your guys' choice what you use. I'm just gonna share what I've had success with so far. And I will link everything down below in the description box if you guys are interested in trying out the products. This is my little watering tote here. And I've got a couple ingredients in here that I wanted to share with you guys. So I'll start with my basic fertilizers. This one here is the Schultz Cactus Plus fertilizer that I just get off of Amazon. This little bottle lasts forever because you literally put just a few drops into a quart of water. So yeah, a little bit of this goes a very long way. It's really affordable, and I obviously use this on all my cactuses. As far as I know, a handful of my cactuses, since I've started using this, have really like shot off and started growing like crazy. But I also don't know how much of it has to do with the fact that it's summertime right now, so that could be a contributor. But so far I like it, and it's really easy to use. And then I've also got, this is one of my other favorite products that I use constantly. This is Super Thrive. I know a lot of other plant tubers use this product. It's a really, really good source of vitamins for your plants, and it also helps with acclimating and reducing the chance of shock in plants as well. And then I've also heard a lot of people, as well as myself, use just a couple drops of this in plant propagation water vessels. Just putting a couple drops in the water helps it to root up and have a better success rate of getting some healthy roots in your water props. So highly recommend this guy for sure. I actually put that in with my fertilizer too, which brings me to this one. This is what I use for my fertilizer. I use this fertilizer specifically because, well, for one, it had good reviews on Amazon, and I got this one because it is a 936 fertilizer. And if you're not sure what that means, it basically, the numbers on a fertilizer mean the percentage of the weight of that certain ingredient in the fertilizer itself. And from what I've read, the lower the number, the slower rate of release of that particular chemical. And I did do a little research because I was curious, but the three numbers stand for N, P, and K, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are all compounds that houseplants need in order to live their best life and be healthy and thrive in the environment that you provide it. And for those of you that are curious, I just wanted to go over what all of those chemicals in the fertilizer help with. I thought it was really fascinating to learn, but also helps you choose your fertilizer if you're kind of leaning towards, you know, one benefit or another, but also depending on what kind and types of plants that you have. So nitrogen is the component of the chlorophyll molecule that helps with new shoots, new growth, and new leaves. Phosphorus is used for new cell division and generation of new plant tissue and roots. And then the potassium triggers new plant enzymes and regulates carbon dioxide uptake by controlling the plant stomata, so the pores in the leaves themselves. So basically, with all that scientific stuff being said, this one is just really good for big leafy plants. It's got a higher number of nitrogen in it, so it's definitely promoting new leaf growth, new shoots, just new growth all around, which everyone loves to see. That's the most rewarding part. And typically with fertilizers, they have directions on the back. I know this one says to use 2 to 3 teaspoons per gallon. but I always dilute that quite a bit because I'm terrified of giving my plants fertilizer burn, which is a real thing. So just be careful when you are fertilizing your plants. Always just go underneath the recommended amount. That's just the safe way to go, because if you end up burning your plants from fertilizer burn, you can't really go back from that, and it sucks. So with me and this one, I usually honestly just do 1 teaspoon per gallon. I could probably up it a little bit if the recommended dose is 2 to 3. But so far, my plants have seemed to be pretty dang happy with the dose that I give them. So like I said, I like to mix my fertilizer and my Super Thrive, these two together. But I also use one little secret ingredient that I want to share with you guys. That I have also had quite a bit of success with so far. This here is a supplement called Silica. I did quite a bit of research before I started using this product on my houseplants. I haven't been using it for super long, I would say probably for a few months now, but silica is known to basically strengthen your plants and their longevity and their ability to adapt and to fight off pests. So the silica helps strengthen your plant tissue, therefore it combats pests better, and it also helps adapt to new environments or environment changes. And these environment changes could be ones that you can't help, like weather, season changes. Maybe you move it to a different spot in your house and, you know, there's more airflow there, or less airflow, less light, more light. Whatever those changes are, the silica really just gives it an extra boost to adapt. And so far, I think since I've started using this, I think I've found spider mites on a few of my plants here and there. But that's pretty much it. And there was actually a pretty good spider mite breakout I noticed on a few of my plants, and none of them looked like they were even touched. Not that they were there on the plants very long, but I really do think that this silica helped kind of just give it that extra coverage that it needs. So definitely do your research on products when it comes to fertilizer, any extra supplements, vitamins, all that kind of stuff. These are just products that I use. I do end up mixing all 3 of these together per gallon. And that's just my preference. I don't do it for every watering, but I try to, especially during the summer. But I will go ahead and link all of these in the description box below if you guys are interested. A couple tips that I do want to give you guys, based on mistakes that I made when I first started out with houseplants. If you're going to be on the scale of underwatering or overwatering, try your best to underwater rather than overwatering, because if you underwater your plant, typically it is a lot easier to come back from that than overwatering. Obviously, we all know overwatering leads to root rot, which is not always a fun situation to come back from. Sometimes you definitely can, and there's other times where you end up having to throw away the plant, which is gonna happen, and that's okay. When I first started out, I overwatered, and it didn't take me long to realize that I was doing something wrong and I needed to make an adjustment. And then I actually ended up becoming an underwaterer. So, and that might also have to do with how many plants I have and how much time I have to water them. But just err on the side of being a little more cautious, and if you're not quite sure if your plant needs water or if you're questioning it, maybe just give it another day or 2, because like I said, underwatering is a lot easier to come back from than overwatering. Another tip I want to give you is to not be on a schedule. None of your plants are going to be on the same watering schedule, especially if you have a variety of plants, like say a Maranta and then a philodendron lemon lime like behind me, or an anthurium over there. They're all going to be on different watering schedules. The Maranta likes to stay a little bit more moist. The philodendron can go with drying out in between waterings almost completely, and if you put them all on the same watering schedule, you're likely going to end up overwatering one or more. If it helps you to keep track of when you water it, that's great. Keep a schedule if that helps, but otherwise each plant needs to be basically on its own schedule, and you just need to water it when it needs to be watered, when it's thirsty. Just don't make like every Sunday watering day and you just go and water everything in your collection, because odds are not all plants are going to want to be watered every Sunday. Some of them might only need to be watered every other Sunday. So my advice to you is really just to check the plant, take the time, and see if it really does need to be watered. And if it does, great, do that. But if you're questionable about whether it does need to be watered, it's likely that you can wait more time between waterings. And like I said before, it really does help to do your research. In my experience, I just know that it helped me a lot to be able to do a little bit of research, just do a quick little read over of what these plant requirements are, because it is different for every plant. Another super basic tip that may seem super obvious, but I honestly didn't really think about when I first started watering plants and all that, was that obviously smaller plants in smaller pots are going to dry out a lot quicker than plants in bigger pots. Let me show you an example. Okay, I grabbed a couple plants so I can show you guys an example. But this is a little Hoya Matilde. This is in a tiny pot, as you can see. Very, very little. This probably needs watered every couple days because it dries out really quick. There's not much room in this pot, and depending on the size of the roots in there, they will be drinking that water up really quick, especially the fact that it's in the middle of summer right now. So those are all factors that's going to make this dry out quicker. That just needs to be something on your radar, that the plants in the smaller pots are probably going to need a little bit more attention, especially in the hot seasons. Now, as compared to this one, this is my Monstera siltepecana, just trailing down here. This is in a bigger pot. It is another plastic pot, but it's significantly bigger than this one. This one, you can probably safely guess, won't need to be watered near as often as the little one. So just keep that in mind. These could probably go a few more days than that one without being watered. I know it kind of seems like common sense, but it's not always something you think about until you realize it. And then even with that being said, keep in mind also, terracotta is known to wick up moisture like crazy. So another thing that I learned very quickly was that I loved the look of terracotta. So I ended up, quite a while back, I repotted a lot of my plants into terracotta because I just thought it looked so cool with the contrast of the terracotta color pot and the green plants. But I figured out that was quickly a mistake because, like I said, I am an underwaterer, and so I found myself having to water my plants like almost twice a week. And for my schedule, I just don't have time for that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You need to know yourself and if your habits are to underwater or to overwater, and kind of adjust your plants by that. So your soil type and your pot type is going to have a contributing factor to how often you need to water your plants. This terracotta pot that has my Cebu blue in it, this one I need to water a lot more than my Monstera siltepecana. Probably almost twice as much. So that's just something to keep in mind. This one actually looks a little bit thirsty, but that's just something to keep in mind when choosing a pot for your plant. This is going to have a big effect on how often you need to water your plants. And that is something I just did not realize in the beginning, and I ended up learning the hard way. So I just wanted to share that so maybe I could avoid a little bit of trouble for you guys. And then just kind of a basic rule of thumb, I use a pretty chunky soil mix for a majority of my plants. And I could probably afford to go a little bit less chunky with how much I underwater, because the chunkier your soil is, the faster it's going to dry out because it's got more of a chance to drain. And it's also a good choice if you are an overwaterer or you find yourself watering more often than not. It is a good choice to have a more chunky soil anyway, because a lot of aeroids, which is most of my collection, prefer that chunky soil mix. But also that's just what I prefer my plants to be in. But if you find yourself being a severe underwater, I might recommend maybe just use a higher percentage or ratio of your soil base as compared to your drainage additives that you put in your soil mix. Okay, I know I've been rambling on a little bit, but the last thing I just wanted to mention was as far as using distilled or if you can use regular tap water. Everybody's water is different, obviously. Here where I live, my tap water has a lot of like fluoride and chemicals in it. So most of my plants do okay with it, but my plants as far as my Marantas, my Anthuriums, Calatheas and all that are a little bit more sensitive to the extra chemicals, I do use distilled water for that, and I just get distilled water from the store and then add my fertilizer and all that stuff into it. So that is one thing that I also recommend to do a little research on, because some plants are a little more sensitive to that and some plants are not affected. All right, you guys, that is all I have for you today. I really hope this video was informative and maybe answered some of your watering questions, but if I missed anything, let me know below, leave a comment, and I would be happy to answer it for you or do some research if it's not something that I already know. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe below for more plants and cats content. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!